Hello everyone, and welcome back. Last time on the Pokemon Soul Silver Unevolved Challenge Run, we'd just gotten our 6th gym badge from Goldenrod Town, while keeping our Pokemon's growth intentionally stunted. Things have gone pretty smoothly so far, with the difficulty curve only really starting to become apparent in the last 2 major battles or so. Just as a reminder, our team was made up of Larry, our level 32 starter Cyndaquil, Sprout, the level 24 Bellsprout, our little baby Scramble, the Togepi at level 34, newest recruit Zip-Zap, the level 26 Magnemite, technically a still unevolved Pokemon according to the Johto Dex, the level 20 Pseudo-Wudo Willow, and of course the HM slave rotations of Senz the Sentret and Birdie the Pidgey. With our business in Olivine now complete, we're going to have to do some backtracking to get to our next destination, so I used Birdie to fly back to PT2 City. I then deposit Birdie back in the box, since despite it being useful to have Fly on me, it's probably more needed to have Senz around to clear any roadblocks to our next destination. I then head out the east exit of the city, popping out onto Route 42. Almost immediately, this hiker rushing out of the mountains crashes straight into me, and to apologize, he gives me HM04 Strength, which lets our Pokemon push boulders around. I wanted to teach this to Senz, since other than Fly, so far I've managed to offload all of my HMs onto him. Unfortunately though, he can't learn this one, so I instead decided to teach it to Willow, since honestly she hasn't been much use anyway, and it's not like Strength is the worst HM to have on a main team member, so whatever. Bye bye Flail. Well, it turns out I probably jumped the gun here a wee bit, since I assumed we'd need Strength to navigate through Mount Mortar, but it turns out that we can get where we need to go as a Strengthless weakling, or we could just use Surf to get across the water here. Oopsie. Still not too bad, since I still need Strength later in the game, and as I mentioned, I wasn't getting much use out of Willow anyway. At the end of the route, we find Mahogany Town, where our next gym battle is. Of course, we can't access the gym just yet, as there's a guy standing out front letting us know about some crazed man running from town to the nearby Lake of Rage, ranting about some radio signal or something. Why that justifies this random guy blocking us from accessing the gym, and presumably anyone unlucky enough to be trapped inside from leaving, I don't know, but whatever, I guess we have to sort it out. Heading out onto Route 43, you're going to want to stick to the grassy path and not go through this building here, since it's a trap set up by Team Rocket to stick us up for some cash. Zip-Zap ended up doing most of the heavy lifting on this route, soloing almost every battle I got into, and doing it while paralyzed for the most part because for some reason I couldn't be bothered to cure it, and by the time we reached the Lake of Rage, it had gotten up to level 29. Not too bad, but sometimes Strength is more about the friends we made along the way. I ended up catching a Magikarp who I was going to name Splish Splash, but apparently that's too long, so I settled for Splishes. Not that it's going to matter much, since this is probably the last you're going to see of this thing. I also found a Girafarig who, just like my Ekans from the last video, I came up with an amazing nickname for, just by spelling its regular name backwards. Looking out over the lake, we can see an enraged Gyarados, but there seems to be something strange about it. Using Surf to get a closer look, we can come face to face with the red Gyarados. For those of you who don't know, this is a shiny Pokemon, a special color variant with an extremely low chance of appearing whenever you encounter a wild Pokemon. They were first added in the original Gold and Silver, and to show off the new mechanic, the developers added this one here as a mandatory encounter, and while being guaranteed shiny makes it less rare, catching it is a tradition of playing through a Johto game, and you'd have to be a real fool not to. Yeah, this felt wrong, but it's an evolved Pokemon, so even if I did catch it, it's not like I could use it, so it's better off to me as XP. Plus, what use is a shiny when it's been caught on an emulator? Real 3DS. I'm playing on a real 3DS. With the Gyarados defeated, we're awarded the Red Scale, which is going to come in handy later. Once back on solid land, we can find this dude, Lance, the previously mentioned madman running back and forth between the town and the lake. He apparently came to investigate the Lake of Rage, as it appears that a mysterious signal from back in town is forcing the Magikarp of the lake to evolve. This is making them enraged and causing them to lash out, which could be a problem, so Lance asks us to help stop it.
I don't like them putting
radio signals
in the water that turn the friggin'
Magikarp into Gyarados.
On the way back to Mahogany Town, I came across something that, to say the least, I wasn't expecting. Yeah, that's a legendary Pokemon right there. Specifically, the legendary beast Raikou. I knew you could find these things in the wild after encountering them back in the Burnt Tower, but I never expected to just come across one randomly. A legendary could prove pretty useful to my team, but the problem with these encounters is that they're really prone to running away. If you can't get them the first ball you throw, they're basically guaranteed to escape. Since I didn't have a chance to prepare for this encounter, I was forced to use whatever I had on me to catch it, but luckily, I just so happened to have a fast ball on me, which is better at catching a Pokemon the faster the Pokemon is, and Raikou has a pretty decent speed stat, so there was a chance that this could work. So, I threw my shot, and wouldn't you know it, it broke free. Then it immediately escaped. Well, damn, got my hopes up for nothing. If only I was, say, playing on an emulator, I could just load a save state and retry. If only. Back in town, there's a little souvenir shop with a frankly odd-looking tree connected to it, and inside we can find Lance, who's just straight up assaulting a man with his Pokemon. Seriously, too far, bro. I get it, Team Rocket is evil and all, but you just straight up killed a dude. Lance says that the strange signal is coming from here, and after intimidating this dude out of the way, he uncovers a secret staircase. He says that we should split up to cover more ground, so we head down into the Team Rocket HQ. This place has some pretty good security. Passing any of these statues for the first time will have the alarm sound and some grunts come to try and kick us out. You can turn the security off, I think, but that's just wasting perfectly particularly good XP for our mons, which by collecting I'm able to get Larry and Zip-Zap both to level 34. Zip-Zap also learnt the move Magnet Bomb, which is a physical attack, so I usually wouldn't consider it for a Magnemite, but I wanted a Steel type move, so I ended up replacing Supersonic for it. There's also this weird patch of ground here that has wild Pokemon spawns, which I don't fully get. I guess it's meant to imply that Team Rocket booby-trapped these panels to release wild Pokemon or something. I ended up catching a Voltorb from these, who I wanted to call Sparky Boom Man, but I was once again thwarted by the character limit. On the second level, we find Lance, who heals up our team before continuing on. This level is home to the audio transmitter, which is behind a locked door, and continuing down to the next floor, we once again find Lance, who tells us that we don't just need a specific passcode, but it needs to be spoken by a specific person, that being the Team Rocket executive Petrol.
It's actually Petrol,
who's hiding away behind another locked door. By battling these two grunts, we're able to get the password, and continuing through the facility, we eventually find the door we need. Before we can open it, Dumas appears, though just like last time we saw him, he's not interested in battling. Guess he finally got tired of getting his butt kicked. He's apparently having a sulk because he lost in a battle against Lance, and got chewed out for not caring about his Pokemon. Despite being the one to approach us, he then gets pissy that we're wasting his time before violently pushing us and running away. Seriously, screw this dude. We can now unlock the door, and behind it we find Petrol, disguising himself as Giovanni, the old leader of Team Rocket before they disbanded, who's been missing ever since. He tells us that the password is Hail Giovanni, since it doesn't matter if we know the code, since without his vocal cords we can't really do anything, but just for good measure he decides to fight us as well. Luckily though, he's a total pushover, and Zip-Zap is able to solo all of his Pokemon no problem. Despite his loss, Petrol is still confident that we'll never be able to get into the transmission room. After he runs away though, the Murkrow that's been sitting in the corner of the room approaches us, repeating the code in a perfect recreation of Petrol's voice, but before we can catch it to use it to open the door, it runs off, so we have to now chase it through the base. Eventually, we track it down to the transmission room, where Murkrow once again mimics the password, causing the doors to open. Of course, it's never that easy though, and before we can take down the transmitter, another Team Rocket executive, Ariana, approaches us, determined to stop us in our tracks, and to ensure this, plans on taking us on 2-on-1 with the help of a regular grunt. Luckily, Lance shows up and calls out their underhanded tactics and joins us to help even the odds. This is another very easy fight. Zip-Zap does go down to the last Murkrow because I misjudged who would move first, but even still, without Lance's help, I think I probably would have handled this. And before anyone gets any silly ideas, no, Lance using a Dragonite to help us doesn't count as using an evolved Pokemon. It's not part of our party, and we have no control over its actions, so this is fine. Ariana tells us that our efforts are in vain, as their experiments have already been proven successful, and they have no further need for this base anyway. She warns us that we'll soon understand Team Rocket's true power before disappearing. We can now take down the transmitter, which unfortunately involves knocking out some electrodes powering it. Once they're all dealt with, Lance thanks us for helping by giving us HM5 Whirlpool, which lets us travel across Whirlpools. He says that if we're determined to become the Pokemon champion, we'll be seeing each other again, before dashing off. With that all sorted, the jerk blocking the entrance to the Mahogany Gym is gone, so we can finally get back on track. This gym is themed around ice, so I figured it might be a chance for Larry to shine, but a lot of the Pokemon in here are also water types, bringing fire damage down to just regularly effective, but also putting electric damage up to super effective, meaning I actually found Zip-Zap to be the better choice here. I actually found the gym puzzle to be more annoying than any of the fights in here. The floor is made of ice, which means when we start moving on it, we're locked into a direction until something cancels our momentum. I don't know, I get how these puzzles work, just start from where you want to be and work in reverse, but for whatever reason, every time I try to get anywhere on the ice in this game, I end up just sliding around like an idiot for several minutes until I luck into the correct path. The leader for this gym is Price, and honestly, this battle shouldn't have been too hard, but it took me a few tries, mainly due to bad decision making since most of my attention was on watching Austin Powers with my mum at the time.
Yeah, baby!
His first mon is a very creatively named Seal, who's pretty non-threatening but can stick around a surprisingly long time. It takes a minimum of 2 Thundershocks to knock down, and will just heal itself with rest, and if you get really unlucky, Price will switch into his second mon, Piloswine, which is immune to electricity, causing Thundershock to be wasted. Piloswine is really the problem here in general, since it's able to OHKO Zip-Zap and Larry with Mud Bomb. I managed to predict the switch and used Magnet Bomb instead of Thundershock to get a little bit of free damage when it switches. I then switched into Scramble once Zip-Zap went down to get a few charms off to lower its physical attack, which I now realize was completely pointless since Mud Bomb is a special attack, but it all worked out since after switching into Sen's, sacrificing him to safely bring in Larry, I was able to outspeed and take out its remaining health with Lava Plume. Next he brings in the even more creatively named and Seal, Dugong. I spent my first turn to revive Zip-Zap, anticipating that Larry would be KO'd by some water type move, but he ends up using Aurora Beam, which doesn't do all that much damage, so I spend the next few turns using Swift to trade damage back and forth until Larry's eventually knocked out, getting Dugong down to about half health. I then send in Zip-Zap, who just barely doesn't manage to take it down. Despite Zip-Zap being one hit away from death, I know that with this much health, Price is probably going to heal next turn, so instead of healing myself, I use the chance to get a free Thundershock off, which takes Dugong back down to just over half. I then heal and get another Thundershock off again, just barely not KOing, and this time it heals all the way back up with rest, so my next attack brings it back down to just over half. Despite all the healing, I figured that this fight was basically settled now, since rest put it to sleep, so I go for another Thunder Shock, but apparently this thing has Sleep Talk, which lets it attack even when it's asleep, and not just that, it gets a critical hit, causing Zip Zap to go down. This fight's starting to get a little bit annoying, but whatever. I bring in Sprout to heal Zip Zap back up, and she actually manages to get a Vine Whip off as well before she goes down. I can then bring Zip Zap back in, and one more Thunder Shock should be more than enough to... Ugh, screw this thing. Whatever, Thunder Shock is now doing half damage instead of a little under half for some reason, so in 2 more Thunder Shocks, Dewgong goes down. All that's left now is to take out his Seal, who is still half dead and asleep from earlier in the fight, so it goes down no problem, winning me the battle. For defeating him, Price awards us the Glacier Badge, as well as the TM for Hail. With that done, we have 1 gym left before we can take on the Elite Four, but before we do that, we have some business to attend to. First, I fly off to Violet City and run over to Mr. Pokemon's house, where I talk to him about the red scale I got from the shiny Gyarados. He of course wants it for his collection, so he offers to trade us the EXP share for it, which is a deal I'm more than ready to accept. This thing lets us split the XP we get from battle, giving half of it to another party member who didn't participate in the battle. This does slow down the leveling process a good bit, but lets me bulk up more of my team at once. I give it to Larry since he's starting to struggle a bit more, and since he's one of my best party members, I should probably try and keep him from dropping off entirely in usefulness. With that out of the way, I'm going to rewind a bit, back to when we exited the Mahogany Gym. As we left, Professor Elm gave us a call to let us know about a strange radio broadcast talking about Team Rocket, which with their recent activities is pretty concerning, so we should probably go check out the radio station in Goldenrod to see what's going on. Back in Goldenrod, it's immediately pretty apparent that something ain't right here, as Team Rocket grunts are everywhere. Entering the radio tower, the stairs to the high levels are being guarded, and we're told that only Team Rocket members are allowed through. For some reason, we can't just stick our Pokemon in this guy and walk past, so if you can't beat them, join them. Head through this building here and down the stairs to find the Goldenrod Underground. Here you'll meet another grunt, who assumes that we must be a new recruit, and so gifts us the Team Rocket uniform. Wearing this is apparently enough to convince the guard in the radio station that we're part of Team Rocket. I guess they just forgot when we tried to sneak in before. Before we can go any further though, Dumas comes along, and after recognizing us, blows our cover, causing the guard to battle us, which goes about as well for them as you might expect. After they run off to warn everyone, instead of apologizing for blowing our cover, Dumas criticizes our plan to sneak in, calling us meek. Oh, I'm meek, am I? Check the scoreboard, buddy. You want to go for round 4? Your Pokemon are going to need more than a visit to Nurse Joy once I'm done with them. Once that jerk's gone, we can start to make our way through the station, the upper floors of which have been completely overrun with Team Rocket. As always, the regular grunts aren't too much to handle, but they do still slowly whittle away at my team, so I made sure to go to the department store while I was here to grab some more revives and heals to keep my team healthy in the field. I also bought some full heals, which can heal any status effect a Pokemon has. On the 3rd floor, there's a locked door, which leads to the part of the station that the Team Rocket leader is hiding in. According to the lady standing near the door, the director could open it up for us, but he's up on the 5th floor, so we need to keep heading up now. On the way up, thanks to the XP share, Larry reached level 37, where he tried to learn the move Flamethrower, which is just an all-round better version of Lava Plume, with the possible exception of in double battles, so I replace it. On the 5th floor, we find the director, but he's acting strange, talking about showing praise to Team Rocket. Well, it turns out that that's not the director at all, but actually Petrol once again in disguise. Apparently, Team Rocket is trying to influence the region into loving Team Rocket by broadcasting propaganda. He tells us that this time he's not going to hold back before once again battling us. This, I think, is the first battle against an opponent with a full team of 6 Pokemon, so I was kind of worried, but to put it nicely, this dude sucks at battling. He's not only got 5 Pokemon all of the same type, but of the same evolutionary family. Bro seriously brought 5 Coughing to a battle and expected to win. While battling him, Zip Zap leveled up to level 38, where it learned Discharge, which I replaced with Thunder Shock, basically being the same scenario as Flamethrower and Lava Plume. After beating him, Petrol tells us that the director is down in the underground warehouse back in the Goldenrod Underground, and even gives us the key to get in. Down in the underground, we again find a lady dressed in a kimono who's impressed that we've been standing up to Team Rocket and mentions something about a legendary Pokemon before catching her words and running off. Heading down into the warehouse, almost immediately Dumas appears yet again to get in our way. Apparently he wants a rematch with Lance and has been telling us to try and get to him, and since he hasn't been able to find him, he's going to take us up on that rematch instead. Dumas has once again added a new member to his team, a Sneasel, but more worrying than that, some of his team has evolved, including a starter going from a Croconaw to a Feraligatr. Despite this though, this fight is still just as easy as all of our other encounters with him. Golbat goes down with a Discharge, Feraligatr also surprisingly only takes 1 Discharge, Haunter takes a few turns thanks to Scramble getting confused, but after halving its own health with a Curse, also goes down in a single hit of Extrasensory. Sneasel takes a Discharge and an Extrasensory. It probably would have been smarter to use Larry for this one, but I smartened up and switch him in to take down Magnemite in 1 Flamethrower. How's that, tough guy? You still think you're God's gift to Pokemon battling? Well, he actually seems to be reconsidering his ways a bit, pondering on what Lance told him about his treatment of his Pokemon before once again running off. The rest of the warehouse is pretty simple, more easy battles, a simple door puzzle, puzzle, and eventually we find the director, who gives us his keycard and begs us to stop Team Rocket before they succeed in their plans. Heading back to the station, we can now open up the door on the 3rd floor to explore the rest of the facility. I also decided to give the XP share to Willow for a while, since I'd already gotten Larry a few levels and wanted to try getting her into fighting shape as well, though honestly, in hindsight, I think I should have just kept focusing on getting Larry stronger. On the way up to the top of the broadcast tower where Team Rocket's leader is hiding, we have to fight both of the remaining Rocket executives, Proton and Ariana, and neither of them are really all that challenging at all. With that done, we can enter the elevator and head up to the observation deck to meet with Team Rocket's leader, Archer. Well, acting leader at least, as it turns out part of pulling this whole stunt was to try and draw their old boss Giovanni back from hiding so he could raise Team Rocket back to its former glory. Of course, he can't have us ruining this plan, so like all of the team members before him, he's going to try and stop us. The only difference here being that he's not a total pushover. The majority of his team are Fire Dark types, both being types that I don't have very great options against. I thought that if I could land all 5 hits of rollout with Larry, I could build up enough damage to sweep Archer's entire team, and this might have worked, but every time I tried it, I'd either miss a hit ending the chain early, or Larry would take too much damage before he could finish. After a few tries, I instead tried to start with Willow to go up against his Houndour so that my good team members would still be around for his harder Pokemon. Rock Throw is actually super effective, and even with being pretty badly outleveled, it doesn't do bad damage. Unfortunately, Houndour outspeeds and manages to make Willow flinch with a bite, but instead of just letting her get KO'd, next turn I decided to use a potion to heal her up. I got another Rock Throw off, but in the meantime, Houndour managed to land 2 more attacks, once again bringing Willow to death's door, and I felt like 2 potions used on her was a bit much, so I just let her get knocked out to bring in Scramble, who got lucky with a Quick Claw and was able to knock Houndour out with an Ancient Power, and even got the Omni Boost from it. After Houndour, he sends in his ace, Houndoom, and even with the Omni Boost raising all Scramble's stats, I didn't like his chances against this thing, so I chose to spend all of his turns using Charm to lower its attack. Surprisingly though, Scramble actually managed to stick around a while, thanks to me doing some great predictions with Wish to heal up, giving me enough time to lower Houndoom's attack to its lowest possible point. Thanks to his lackluster damage, I was able to get 2 Ancient Powers off and probably would have actually been able to knock it out if he hadn't gotten a lucky crit. I brought in Larry to start a rollout chain which took Houndoom out on its first hit. Archer then brought in a Coughing. I landed 2 rollouts, getting it down to about a third of its health before Larry was taken out, but no worries, at this point the fight is basically over, so I bring in Zip Zap to bring down Archer. Archer whines about his loss, but decides to follow in the footsteps of Giovanni and do the honourable thing by disbanding Team Rocket, before disappearing. Yeah, not gonna lie, this whole plotline feels a bit anticlimactic. It probably would have helped if we'd had even a single encounter with Archer before to build him up as this big villain and flesh out his motivations a little. After Archer disappears, the director of the radio tower shows up and thanks us for clearing out Team Rocket. To show his appreciation, he gives us the Silver Wing, an ancient artifact discovered when the radio station was built on the side of an ancient tower. Apparently, it's linked with the legendary Pokemon of the region, and in conjunction with another item is said to be able to summon it. With that all dealt with, we can now get back on with our gym challenge. I flew back to Mahogany Town and headed out the east onto Route 44, which leads us to the Ice Path. This is an icy cave full of more of those damn sliding puzzles. Seriously, in theory this is so easy, so why do I struggle so much? There's not many trainers in here due to the intense cold, but we do find another kimono lady trapped on the ice, so we help get unstuck. There's still wild mons to fight and catch in here as well. I got a Swinub who I called Cold Fuzz, like Hot Fuzz because he's a pig, but icy. I also got a Delibird, and frankly, I had no clue what to call this thing. I was running out of creative names for these guys fast, so I just randomly hit inputs and came out with the name Sirquiga6 Gadooey. You can also find the HM for Waterfall in here behind another sliding puzzle, which, go figure, lets us use our Pokemon to swim up waterfalls, an ability that will be needed later in the game, so you might as well collect it now while you're here. The end of the Ice Path spits us out into the location of our next gym battle, Blackthorn. Luckily, there's no big threat or distraction this time, so we can jump straight into the gym challenge, and this is probably the gym that had me the most worried. It's themed around Dragon-type mons, which are some of the most fearsome and powerful ones in the game, holding only 2 weaknesses, to Dragon and Ice, neither of which I have access to. Not only that, but most of my best moves, they actually resist, so my options are to either use low damage moves or not very effective ones, neither of which is a good option. Even the standard gym trainers aren't pushovers, with me having to rush my Pokemon to the Pokemon Center to heal after basically every duel. Plus, the gym puzzle itself is kind of frustrating. You have to move these platforms around to get them into the correct position to continue down the path, and even when you know the exact inputs to get you to the end, it still takes ages. Once we do get to the end though, we can face Claire, and if you thought I was setting up some bait and switch where the final battle was actually really easy, well, guess again, because she had me stumped for more than any other roadblock so far. She first sends out a Gyarados, which isn't a dragon type, but is dragon adjacent, so I'll give it a pass. Plus, without the dragon type, it's 4 times weak to electric, so it goes down in 1 discharge from Zip Zap. Gyarados does outspeed Zip Zap though, and manages to get off a Dragon Rage, which does a set 40 damage every time it hits, so it's pretty easy to tell if your Pokemon's going to survive it. The real trouble starts when she sends in her first Dragonair. This thing thing can outspeed and OHKO basically all of my useful Pokemon. The only one who can even get a hit off is Larry, but even then, none of his moves do great damage, so maybe we just need to get super effective moves then. I did pick up the TM for Avalanche, which is an Ice-type move, but as far as I can tell, the only one I've caught that can learn it is Sequoia 6 Gadooey, the Delibird, and I kind of doubt a Delibird is going to be the key to beating the final gym. But regardless, I give it a go, and wouldn't you know it, it doesn't really help at all, since Sequoia 6 Gadooey is just getting outsped before it can even use Avalanche. I even tried giving it the Quick Claw to maybe let it get an Avalanche off before getting knocked out, but I must have reset 20 plus times to get this thing to work, and Sequoia 6 Gadooey never moved first, so I don't know what's going on. So if getting a type advantage isn't going to be enough, the only option really left to me is the dreaded grind. I head to the ice cave and just start decimating the natural wildlife of the area with Zip Zap. I also did a little bit of research and figured out why the Quick Claw never worked for Sequoia 6 Gadooey. See, the Quick Claw gives a Pokemon roughly a 1 in 4 chance to go first in cases where it's outsped, but speed isn't the only determining factor to see who goes first. Every move in the game has a priority, ranging from -5 to 5, and regardless of a Pokemon's speed, if their opponent uses a move with a high priority, it's going to be going first. It just so happens that Avalanche has a priority of -4, one of the slowest moves in the game, meaning that the Quick Claw is close to worthless for it. I ended up heading back to Goldenrod and buying the TM for Blizzard, which has a better priority and a great base power to replace Avalanche, but this was kind of pointless since Sequoia 6 Gadooey himself is honestly just kind of useless, and even with a good move is destined to be nothing more than switch fodder in this fight. After about 2 hours of grinding with only the occasional break to see if my matchup against Claire was improving, I had gotten Zip Zap all the way to level 50, my hope being that now it could outspeed most of her team. I also taught it Mirror Shot over Magnet Bomb and Gyro Ball over Sonic Boom, the latter of which I slightly regret since even though Sonic Boom isn't a great move dealing a set 20 damage, it can help when capturing new mons since the other moves risk KOing it. I didn't just level Zip Zap though, and by the time I was ready to fight Claire again for real, this is what my team was looking like. I also gave Zip Zap an Orange Berry to heal it up a little in case its health drops under half, and with that, I was ready to try the fight again. Things still weren't great, and I failed a few more times, but now it definitely felt more doable. I can now outspeed an OHKO a Gyarados, meaning that Zip Zap can make it to a Dragonair completely unharmed. I also now outspeed a Dragonair, so I go for a Mirror Shot which does a surprisingly good amount of damage, and even manages to lower her accuracy, apparently so much so that she misses her next Fire Blast. Not that it really matters since my next Mirror Shot misses and her next Fire Blast doesn't, so we kinda just took a longer route to end up in the same place. Though this doesn't knock Zip Zap out, leaving it on just 20 health after it eats its Orange Berry, and with one more Mirror Shot, Dragonair actually goes down. Hell yeah, progress! Though I probably shouldn't be celebrating too soon since Dragonair isn't her last Pokemon or even her ace, though that title goes to Kingdra. I'd actually managed to get to this thing a few times before, but each time, none of my mons could even scratch it. It was a total wall, and for this attempt, things weren't feeling much easier. I decided to switch into Sprout, basically just as a sacrifice to give me a chance to heal Zip Zap back up. I then brought Zip Zap back in, hoping that with its improved level it might now outspeed Kingdra, but no luck there, and Zip Zap was immediately knocked out by this thing's scariest move, Hydro Pump, which is strong enough to OHKO all of my team. I next brought in Sequoia 6 Gadooey in the hopes that they could get a Quick Claw Blizzard off, but no prizes for guessing what happened there. I then brought in Scramble to revive Zip Zap again, but honestly, even with Zip Zap in fighting condition, I had no idea what I was going to do to turn this thing around. And that's when I had a Brain Blast. See, Kingdra's next Hydro Pump misses, and that made me remember that Hydro Pump only has 5 PP, meaning that it can only be used a maximum of 5 times, and she's already used it 3. If I have her waste her last 2 uses of Hydro Pump from my Switch Fodder mons, I might still have a chance. I continued healing Zip Zap with Scramble, and Kingdra got off another Hydro Pump, this one unfortunately working and knocking Scramble out. I then brought in Willow, and wouldn't you know it, Kingdra's last Hydro Pump misses, actually letting Willow get off a Rock Throw, and a critical at that. A Dragon Pulse finishes Willow off, but without a stab super effective water move to use, I felt a lot more confident bringing in Larry, who was knocked out by a Dragon Pulse. Okay, we're back into not looking so good. Zip Zap is my last chance, so in it comes. Immediately a smokescreen lands, lowering my accuracy, and thanks to a misclick in my nervous state, I use a Mirror Shot instead of a Discharge. Luckily, Dragon Pulse isn't all that effective against Zip Zap, and despite the lowering of my accuracy, I get off a critical Discharge, finishing off Kingdra. Still, no time to relax though, as Claire has one more Pokemon, but it's nothing Zip Zap hasn't dealt with before, being a second Dragonair, this one lacking Fire Blast, but still with only one teammate left, I can't really afford to get comfortable. A Mirror Shot drops Dragonair down to about half health, but Zip Zap then gets paralyzed by a Thunder Wave. I then take a turn to revive Larry just to give me some wiggle room in case Zip Zap goes down. I then heal Zip Zap up and go for another Mirror Shot, but paralysis hits so I have to heal up again, and this time I smarten up and cure my paralysis so that my next Mirror Shot can miss, and Zip Zap can get paralyzed again. Well, luckily my next mirror shot manages to go off and bring down her last Dragonair, claiming me victory. Phew, that was a tough one, but not gonna lie, it was super satisfying to finally beat her, although Claire seems determined to take that satisfaction from us and refuses to give us our rightfully earned badge, saying that we're not ready to face the Pokemon League. What is with the characters in this game, acting so tough after they've already been defeated? Lady, I beat you. If I'm not League material, what does that say about you? She tells us that we should take on the Dragon Masters challenge in the shrine behind the gym, and I guess we don't really have any other options, so I use Surf on the lake behind the gym to enter the Dragon's Den. I don't really have much to say about this area. It's pretty small with a few trainer battles, but just mostly random encounters with Magikarp. You do need Whirlpool to get to the end of it though, and none of my team can learn it, so I ended up putting Sens in the box and taking out Squishy, who can actually learn all the water-type TMs we need. So since we don't really need Sens for Surf anymore, this is actually our final goodbye. So long, Sens. You didn't do much, but with that done, we can reach the shrine, and here we find the Elder, who seems to know why we're here. I guess Claire's little fits are a common occurrence. He tests us by asking us a bunch of questions, and I didn't know if it was possible to fail his test or not, so despite being tempted to pick the funnier options, I just played it straight. After this, the Elder confirms that we are ready for the Pokemon League, which causes Claire to run in and have a tantrum, since apparently she hasn't even been able to pass the Elder's test. The Elder reprimands her, saying that she has to give us the badge or he'll get Lance involved, which finally convinces her to hand over the goods, giving us the Rising badge. After Claire leaves, the Elder drops some knowledge on the legendary Pokemon Lugia, saying that it's said to be found in the Whirl Islands near Cyanwood. On the way out of the Dragon's Den, we find Claire, who seems to have reflected on her actions and wants to apologize. As a sign of good faith, she offers us a TM for Dragon Pulse and tells us that we can get to the Pokemon League by surfing along the waters all the way back home in Newbark Town. With Claire's badge now ours, we've officially beaten the Pokemon Gym Challenge, and now we qualify to take on the Elite Four, some of the most powerful trainers in the game, but before we do that, I've got some other business to take care of first. First, Professor Elm asked us to swing by his lab, so I ended up teaching Fly to Sequoia 6 Gadooey and headed back home. Heading into the lab, we're greeted by Ethan, who's ecstatic to hear that we collected every badge and takes us to see the Professor. Elm congratulates us for our victory and, as a prize, gives us the Master Ball, a special Pokeball with a 100% chance of catching any Pokemon we yeeted at. He also mentions that a group of ladies dressed in kimonos has apparently been looking for us and are waiting to meet us at the dance theatre back in Ecruteak, so we head over there. As we enter the hall, Dumas also runs out, blocking our path. Looks like he lost yet another battle, this time against the Kimono Girls, which seems to have had a change on his demeanour a little, with him admitting he was outmatched and even warning us about the girl's strength, though he still violently pushes us on his way out, so I guess he hasn't changed all that much. Heading inside, we see the 5 Kimono Girls that we met along our journey. Apparently, they've been looking for someone capable of bringing back the legendary Pokemon Lugia, and to do this, they gave the mystery egg to Mr. Pokemon, asking him to give it to someone with potential, and seeing as it ended up in our hands, and we even managed to hatch it, we must be worthy. She warns us, though, that being pure alone won't be enough to face Lugia, and that we must prove our strength first, and so challenges us to a battle. This sets off a chain of battles with each of the Kimono ladies, with each one using only one Pokemon, those being one of the 5 evolutions. I didn't prepare at all for this fight, so I had to kind of play it by ear. First up was Umbreon, who I managed to get a critical on with Flamethrower, which does over half its health, but I didn't notice that this was a crit, so just assumed that a second Flamethrower would knock it out, leading to Larry getting knocked out instead. Luckily, Zip Zap was able to finish it off with a Mirror Shot. Next is the Kimono Girl that we met in the Ilex Forest, who uses an Espeon. Because I can't switch my team order between battles, I had to start with Sprout, who went down immediately, letting me bring in Zip Zap again. Zip Zap took 2 Psychics, getting its health down pretty low, but in a discharge and a Mirror Shot, Espeon went down. Next is the lady that we saved from a grunt in this very building with a Flareon. This was my most nervous matchup, since Zip Zap is weak to fire. I started with Scramble, who I tried to use to get an ancient power off, but he was immediately knocked out. Realizing that Zip Zap was really my only option here, I switched into Squishy to heal it up. Then, after he was knocked out, I brought it in. Thankfully, a discharge gets the paralysis off, which stopped Flareon from moving, letting me get a second one off to bring it down. Next is the most recent Kimono Girl we met, the one that we freed from the ice, who, as you might well expect, uses a Jolteon. Again, not a great matchup for Zip Zap, though this time on the offensive side rather than the defensive. It also outspeeds me and goes for a double team to raise its evasiveness twice, which just makes the fight that much more annoying. I still managed to land my first 2 Mirror Shots, which gets it just under half health, but then I just kept missing discharges, forcing me to spend my turns to heal up the damage I was taking. Jolteon then got a taste of its own medicine, missing its next 2 attacks, while I was able to land another Mirror Shot, followed by another on my next turn, bringing it down. Finally, it's the Kimono Girl that we met in the Goldenrod Tunnel, who uses a Vaporeon like some kind of degenerate. This should have been the best matchup for Zip Zap, being weak to electricity, but it manages to just barely survive my first discharge, and then gets off a Surf through its paralysis, which knocks Zip Zap down. Nothing a quick heal can't fix though, and after bringing Zip Zap back in, the last of the Kimono Girls goes down. With our worthiness now proven, we're given the title bell by the girls' leader. Just then, the lady's younger sister rushes in, apparently having seen a massive Pokemon by the Whirl Islands, causing all the Kimono ladies to rush off, so we should probably follow them. I fly to Cyanwood, then surf over to the northeastern island and use Whirlpool to gain access to the cave in here. The cave is dark, making it hard to see, but that can be alleviated with Flash, which I teach Tenacious Sprout, since outside of being useful for lighting caves, it's a pretty useless move, so I don't want it on any of my main battlers. I struggled to catch any of the Pokemon in here since I kept knocking them out accidentally, but I did manage to get a Seal, who looks like a real party animal, so I decided to call out Clubbin' time. After navigating the cave for a bit, the path is blocked by some old dude, but by showing him the silver wing, he lets us through. In the higher cave, I grab a second rare candy before heading into the bottom cave, where I meet back up with the 5 kimono girls. They tell us that the special dance that they've been practicing in combination with the sound of the tidal bell should be enough to summon Lugia, and after watching their performance, that's exactly what happens. Now I can make a quick save and surf out to meet it. I could just use the Master Ball to capture this thing, but I decided that would be lame, so I'm gonna capture it the old-fashioned way. Zip Zap's first discharge does a surprising amount of damage, knocking Lugia down to half health, and even getting the paralysis. Lugia then goes for a Hydro Pump, which after my experience with Kingdra, I figured was bound to OHKO me, but I guess Zip Zap's gotten a lot stronger since then, since it manages to survive on 1 HP. I then go for Mirror Shot, which is less than effective, and then Zip Zap goes down to an extra sensory. I wasn't really sure who to bring in next, since it needed to be someone strong enough to survive Lugia's hits, but weak enough not to immediately knock it out. My first thought was Scramble, but apparently he went a little too far into the weak side. I then brought in Larry, who did the trick nicely, with Swift slightly chipping away at Lugia's health as it struggled to do anything through its paralysis, eventually getting it down to the range where I felt comfortable throwing Ultra Balls at it. It took a few more fainted Mons, but in just 2 Ultra Balls, I was able to tame Lugia, naming it Luigia, after my personal hero. You know him, you love him, it's Luigi Galvani, the discoverer of animal magnetism. How's that for a bait and switch? The thing about Lugia is, just like most legendary Pokemon, it doesn't evolve from or into anything, making it an unevolved Pokemon, and therefore legal in this challenge. Despite that though, using a legendary on our team seems a little against the spirit of the run, so for now at least, I'm gonna forgo using Lugia on my team, but I withhold the right to add it later if I get stumped. Just like the defeat of Team Rocket, this whole plotline ends in a bit of an anticlimax, with the kimono ladies just kinda saying, cool, you caught it. You can go now. I don't know, it just feels like a little bit more fanfare is in order for catching a creature of legends. With Lugia now ours, there's nothing left to do other than challenge the Pokemon League, so head back home to New Town. Before setting off for the League, you'll want to make sure that you have a Pokemon with Surf, Waterfall, and Strength, since all of those are required to reach the Indigo Plateau, and if possible, you'll also want Fly for emergency retreats to the Pokemon Center. I also made sure to stock back up on potions and revives since I was starting to get a little low. Once your team is ready, use Surf on the pond next to your house, and after reaching the other side of the water, you'll have officially made an illegal border crossing into the Kanto region. For whatever reason, Johto doesn't have its own Pokemon League, instead piggybacking off the neighbouring Kanto's League. In the nearby cave, we have our first and only use of Waterfall, as it's needed to ascend the waterfalls in here. I also caught a Goldeen in here I named Sushi, and a Slowpoke I called Pinky. Back on Route 27, some of the battles were starting to prove challenging. Nothing undoable, but I was finding myself eating up more of my potions and revives than usual, but if you can get far enough along, you can find a house which acts as a limited Pokemon Center, letting us rest to heal our team. I also didn't stop catching new Pokemon despite the game almost being over, getting a Doduo and named Peck. I also got a Ponyta, and I can admit the last few Pokemon I've caught I haven't had great nicknames for, but I had the perfect idea for what to call this thing. Problem is, it wasn't very family friendly, PG squeaky clean, if you know what I mean. My content's not made for kids, but I still try and toe the line a little, so I was torn between doing the funny thing and the less risky thing, but before I could make up my mind, a misclick made it up for me, so Ponyta didn't get a nickname at all. At the end of the route, we enter a building with a guard who checks to make sure that we have all 8 badges before we enter the Victory Road, the final stretch before the Pokemon League. Not much happens in here, there aren't any trainer battles, and all of the wild Pokemon that appear are evolved as far as I know, so there's no one to catch either. Just as we're about to exit though, we're once again approached by Damask. Apparently, the reason that there are no trainers in here is because Damask defeated them all as training. He calls all the trainers weak, which is par for the course with him, but surprisingly, he finally admits that we aren't, showing some respect for our skill, though he's still determined to best us, and so it's time for our final showdown, and this goes about as poorly for him as all of our previous battles. Sneasel goes down in a flamethrower, I sacrifice Willow to heal up Zip Zap, then Feraligatr goes down in a discharge, and so does Haunter. I switch back to Larry for Kadabra, and it fires the first flamethrower, but just barely. Then his Golbat and Magneton both get OHKO'd. Larry leveled up during this fight and learned his final move, Eruption, a devastating base 150 special move, which I thought was just a straight up upgrade from Flamethrower, other than the lower PP. Turns out I didn't read the flavor text closely enough though, and this attack gets weaker the lower the user's HP is, which is a pretty debilitating downside, basically making it only worth using when my health is pretty much full, so in hindsight I probably would have kept Flamethrower over this. With Damask once again defeated, he finally seems to show some humility, admitting that we have something that he's lacking. He's still not done with us yet though, and plans on getting stronger until he's able to beat us. With that done, we can leave the Victory Road and enter the Indigo Plateau, home to the Pokemon League. Entering the Pokemon League building, this was the levels that my team was sitting at. I'd really stopped even bothering to work on Willow, Sprout, and Sequoia 6 Skidooey and just focused all my levels into Zip Zap, Larry, and to a lesser extent Scramble, so they were going to be my main team. Ahead of us is a series of 5 battles against some of the strongest trainers in the game, and not only do we have to beat them all, all, but we have to do it back to back, in one stretch. If we get knocked out right at the end, it's all the way back to the beginning, so I make sure to heal my team up and stock up on revives and heals. I then make a save outside so I can return to the start if things go south, and with that, I head in to take on the Elite Four. This was mainly an exploratory journey to see how hard things were going to be, but to my surprise on my first attempt it actually went pretty well. First we have to deal with Will, and he's kind of a pushover. While I don't have any direct counters for the Psychic type, which is his speciality, all of his team members have secondary types which make them weak to either fire or electric, making Zip Zap and Larry the perfect choice for dealing with them. First he sends in a Xatu who gets outsped and goes down in one discharge. Next is a Jinx, who is probably his most problematic team member for multiple reasons. I figured Larry was the best choice with Jinx being an Ice type, but he gets outsped and hit with a Psychic, which does pretty great damage. And remember, Eruption does less damage the lower you use its health, so it barely puts a dent into this thing, despite being super effective. I decided to reset since I didn't want to waste a heal this early, and this time I chose to use Zip Zap against Jinx. I tried to paralyze it, but Zip Zap is also outsped and gets put to sleep with the Sweet Kiss, which is annoying, forcing me to spend a turn to get rid of it with an awakening I had lying around. Luckily, Zip Zap is much bulkier than Larry and was able to tank a few Psychics to get a Thunder Wave off to paralyze it, and after healing up, I was able to take down Jinx in 2 discharges. His next 2 mons go down just as easy as first. His Executor folds to an Eruption and Slowking to a discharge. Zip Zap also learns its final move after defeating Slowking, that being Zap Cannon, which is kinda like the electric version of Eruption, but without the lower health, lower damage drawback, and a guaranteed paralysis if it lands, which with that hit rate isn't guaranteed. I didn't want to get rid of Discharge though, so I got rid of Gyro Ball since I wasn't really using it at all. Lastly, Will sends in his second Xatu, but this one can actually outspeed Zip Zap, letting it get a Confuse off, but Zip Zap works through the confusion, landing a Discharge to bring the fight to an end. I realized after this fight that while I had healed my team up before entering the league, I hadn't used any of the items that I collected through my playthrough to improve them, so I gave both my rare candies to Zip Zap since it's already my ace, raising its level to 57. I also used a PP up to raise the PP of Zap Cannon since 5 uses before running out isn't really all that many. I then headed through into the next room to face the second Elite Four member, Koga. He uses Poison type Mons, so I figured that Scramble with his Psychic type move might be a good fit. Despite being super effective though, it doesn't really do all that much damage, and Scramble gets pretty beaten up by his first Pokemon, Ariados, so I decided to switch into Larry since Ariados is also a bug and therefore weak to fire. Larry gets knocked down to half health on the switch, but an Eruption is still enough to take Ariados down. Next he sends in a Fortress, another bug type Mon, so I kept Larry in and once again a half-powered Eruption was able to OHKO. Next up is his Muck, and I don't really like to swear on my channel, so you know I'm serious when I say this. Frick this frickin' fricker. I hate this Muck so much, and it's all thanks to its moveset. This thing has Minimize, which raises its evasion, and it likes to use it a lot, making it near impossible to hit, especially since my best move against it is Zap Cannon, which already only has a 50% chance to land, and it's not like you just need to land one hit to get through. Nope, it'll survive a Zap Cannon, and then Koga will usually heal it, meaning that it'll survive the next one too. Plus, it's holding a Black Sludge, so even if you can knock its health down low enough and Koga doesn't heal it, if you can't immediately deal the final blow, maybe because every one of your attacks keeps missing, it'll slowly heal its way back up using that. Seriously, just screw this thing, and just screw Minimize too, and all the other accuracy lowering and evasion raising moves in general. They just aren't fun to fight against. It's not like it's impossible to take this thing down, but you just gotta get lucky with it, unfortunately. I always ended up wasting a ton of Zap Cannon and my other moves PP here, so it's a good thing that I have a ton of PP restorative items. Next is his Venomoth, who is much easier, going down to a critical discharge. Then it's his Crobat, and more evasiveness shenanigans, that's just great. Well, at least this thing is weak to electric, so I just need to get a single Zap Cannon off to win the fight. Next up is Bruno, and yeah, we don't talk about Bruno. This guy and his fighting type Mons were easily the toughest of the Elite Four battles for me, mainly since I just don't have any good options to battle them with. I could use Scramble's Extrasensory, which would be super effective, but with Scramble being a normal type and almost certainly too slow to move first, I doubt that he'll be sticking around to get one off. Despite also being weak to fighting, I decided to go with Zip Zap since it's definitely the strongest party member I have. Bruno starts with a Hitmontop who I outspeed and one discharge is enough to bring down to half health and paralyze. It then goes for a dig which removes Hitmontop from the field for a turn before dealing damage on the next turn, and since I outspeed, any attack I use is guaranteed to miss, so instead I spend my turn to switch into Willow to take the hit. She actually manages to survive, but goes down to a quick attack on the next turn. Doesn't matter though, as this lets me switch back into Zip Zap to knock it out with a discharge. Next is Onyx, who I don't have much to say about, and goes down in a single mirror shot, but then comes Hitmonlee, and this is where the problems begin. This thing is fast enough to outspeed every Pokemon I have, and its high jump kick is an instant death sentence as well. I really don't see any way that I can beat this thing, at least not with my team where it currently stands, so after losing my team and blacking out, I reload my save from before I challenged the Elite Four, and now it's grind time. Though it's not much of a grind really, I just barely get Zip Zap to level 54 so it can learn Zap Cannon before challenging the league rather than during. The main difference with this attempt are the items I use, as I didn't really have any on my team last time. I gave Zip Zap a Choppleberry, which is one in a series of berries that that your mum buys for you. These reduce super effective damage taken from specific types to just regularly effective, this one working on fighting type moves. My hope was that this would let Zip Zap survive a hit from Hitmonlee and be able to OHKO and return with Zap Cannon. I also gave Larry the Quick Claw as a backup in case Zip Zap failed, the hope being that it would be able to move before Hitmonlee and maybe take it down. I then used all the stat, level, and PP increasing items I did last time on my team and once again challenged the Elite Four. This time I saved before each member so I could try them again if I lost, but this also overrides my save outside the league, meaning that I'm locked into this attempt. My first two fights go about the same as before, though I have to retry Koga a few times due to his muck. Then it comes time for Bruno, round 2. Hitmontop and Onyx go about the same, and when he brings in Hitmonlee, Zip Zap is still in full health. Immediately, Hitmonlee goes for a high jump kick, but thanks to the Tropical Berry, Zip Zap survives and gets a Zap Cannon off, which he also unfortunately just barely survives. He is paralyzed though, and thanks to the speed drop from that, I knock him out with a mirror shot. Honestly kinda surprised, I expect him to use a potion to heal or something. Still not out of the woods yet though, as he has one more Hitmon to deal with, that being Hitmonchan, and without Zip Zap's berry to take the hit for us, I think things could get ugly, so I switch into Larry. Larry outspeeds Hitmonchan, so I'm able to get a full power eruption off, which does less than I would have expected honestly, but his attack does even less, meaning that I still have a high enough HP for my next eruption to finish the job. Now all that's left is Machamp. Larry once again outspeeds, but eruption doesn't even do half of his health this time, and it hits me with a revenge that knocks Larry out. I still have Zip Zap though, and it also outspeeds, so I'm able to finish Bruno off with a Zap Cannon. Okay, that went a lot better than I was expecting. I was honestly thinking of adding Lugia to my party since its psychic typing would have been perfect for this fight, but I'm glad that I stuck to my guns and didn't use a legendary. But there's no time to celebrate yet, as there's one more Elite Four member left, so I heal up my party before moving on to take on Karen. She uses Dark type Mons, another type that I don't have great coverage for, but one that's also not great against any of my team, so I felt a lot more confident here than I did with Bruno. I start with Larry up against her Umbreon, but I didn't realize that all of Eruption's PP was used up at this point. I decided to try and start a rollout chain, but was horrified to see it use Double Team, an evasion raising move, so I entirely expected to just miss my next rollout, ending the chain. To my shock though, I landed my next rollout, and despite Umbreon raising its evasiveness again, I then landed a third, and on the fourth turn the exact same thing happened, with rollout now having the power to finish Umbreon off. I have never gotten luck that amazing in any game ever. Landing 4 already not perfectly accurate moves against an opponent with 3 times boosted evasiveness is actually crazy. And then when Karen brings in Houndoom, the Quick Claw goes off, and I land the 5th final fully powered up rollout, which is super effective against Houndoom's fire type, immediately knocking it out. Where was this luck in the rest of the game? She then brings in Gengar, who I decide to bring Scramble in to deal with since Ghost moves don't affect him and Extra Sensory is super effective. Gengar's first hit misses and my Extra Sensory crits, bringing it just under half health, followed by another miss from Gengar and another Extra Sensory which just barely leaves it alive. Karen then uses a full restore, but my next Extra Sensory again crits, once again bringing it just under half health. Seriously, I don't know what dark god I unintentionally made a deal with, but keep the good luck coming and I'll harvest all the Soul's Wand. Well, maybe my Blood Pact with the Dark one is a little too soon, as Gengar's next Focus Punch lands, which insta-kills Scramble, and when I bring Zip Zap in, the same thing happens, and once again with Larry. I use my Switch Fodder to heal up Zip Zap, but when Willow comes in, Gengar just keeps going for Destiny Bond, which is a move that makes the opponent faint if the user is taken down. Since I don't really care about keeping Willow alive, I use a few feint attacks to bring us both down. I then bring Zip Zap back in, but her next Pokemon is a Vileplume, a Grass type, so Larry would have probably been the better choice here. I tried to use Zip Zap's Zap Cannon, but it just kept missing, all the while Vileplume was able to paralyze Zip Zap and do some good damage with Pearl Dance. Eventually, once I run out of Zap Cannon PP, she gets confused. I go for the discharge, but my paralysis kicks in and she works through her confusion, leaving Zip Zap on 9 HP. I use a full restore to get rid of the paralysis and heal up, and of course Vileplume once again attacks through the confusion. Next turn I paralyze it though and manage to finally land some hits with a mirror shot to bring Vileplume down in 3 hits. Finally is a Murkrow, who takes a single discharge to go down, defeating Karen and claiming us victory over the Elite Four. Sure, the Elite Four might have been conquered, but there's still one more battle that we have to complete before we can really be called the very best like no one ever was. The Pokemon League champion of both the Johto and Kanto regions, our old friend, Lance the Dragon Tamer. This is what it's all been building up to. If we can defeat him, we'll be crowned the new Pokemon champion. I heal up my Pokemon and restore all of Larry and Zip Zap's PP before we approach him. Lance tells us that he's been waiting for us and that he knew we'd be able to make it here before accepting our challenge. As the title of Dragon Tamer might have tipped you off to, Lance uses Dragon-type Pokemon, which, given how much I struggled against the last Dragon Trainer I met, just gives me more reasons to be nervous for this battle. Despite that, things actually got off to a good start, with Gyarados going down in a single discharge, which also gains Zip Zap another level. Next is Charizard, who, just like Gyarados, isn't technically a Dragon-type, but is still Dragon-adjacent, so it's fine. Despite being a Fire-type, I chose to keep Zip Zap in against him, but this was the wrong call. Zip Zap can actually survive an attack from Charizard, and a Zap Cannon probably would have been enough to OHKO, but the accuracy was proving an issue, so I decided to reload. Before challenging Lance again though, I switched around my items, giving Zip Zap an Occa Berry, which is another super effective dampening berry, this one for the Fire type. I also switched Larry's Quick Claw for a Choice Scarf, which offers a straight up buff to his speed instead of just giving him a chance to go first. It does come with the downside of only letting me use one of my moves until Larry is switched out, but for the strategy that I'm planning, that's not going to bother me much. On my second attempt, things went way better. I switched into Larry for Charizard and started a rollout chain, which being a rock type move, Charizard is actually doubly weak to, making it go down in just 2 hits, and since it misses its attack, Larry moves on with full health. This is basically my plan here. After having so much luck with rollout in the last battle, I figured it could do the same for me here. Next is an Aerodactyl who just barely survives the 3rd hit of rollout. He goes to use Rock Slide, which would almost definitely KO Larry, but just like Charizard, it misses its attack. I'm getting such good luck these last 2 battles, it's actually insane. Lance heals Aerodactyl of course, but it doesn't matter since the next rollout is even stronger and KOs regardless. Okay, halfway done, but the second half of this party is where it gets really scary, as it's entirely made up of Dragonite. The evolved form is Dragonair, one of Claire's Pokemon that gave me a lot of trouble, so there's still plenty of time for this fight to go south. But damn, is it just me or is rollout a really underrated move? Still, that's the end of my rollout chain, and I still have 2 Dragonite to get through. I try to start a new chain on his second Dragonite, but the first hit barely does anything and Larry is immediately taken out by a Dragon Rush, so I'm gonna need a new plan. I bring in Zip Zap, but without a Choice Scarf, it gets outsped and paralyzed by a Thunder Wave, but I'm able to get a Zap Cannon off, which isn't quite enough to take it down. Lance heals next turn, but I manage to get through the paralysis and half its health with a Discharge. A few turns go by without me being able to land an attack, and Zip Zap gets pretty low, but eventually I manage to get a second Discharge off. Somehow though, despite the first hit seemingly doing half of Dragonite's health, the second leaves him just barely alive. Next turn we both use full restores, so the battle's basically just back to phase 1, but things go much better for me this time, landing a Zap Cannon and a Discharge to bring it down. 5 down, 1 to go. I switch into Squishy so that I can heal up Zip Zap before bringing it in, and from here things basically go the same as the last Dragonite. I miss a few attacks and take a few hits, but with a Zap Cannon and a Discharge, it goes down, claiming us victory over Lance's fancy fully grown dragons with nothing more than a group of babies. With Lance defeated, we're officially the new Pokemon League champion. We're taken to cement our victory by registering our team in the Hall of Fame. This only honors the members that we had in our party at the time, but honestly, I feel like there are a lot more Pokemon who deserve some credit, even some I really wish didn't deserve it. Everyone here had a part to play in getting me here, and sure, some of them were just Switch fodder or HM slaves, but they still deserve some credit. As for MVPs though, Zip Zap, Larry and Scramble definitely proved their worth, each one having at least one moment where I relied on them to get me through and they succeeded. Zip Zap especially pulled way more than its fair share of the weight towards the end. But the question still remains. Can you beat Pokemon Soul Silver unevolved? Yeah, you absolutely can. I could still take on the Kanto gyms in Red, but honestly, that feels like a challenge of its own. We beat the main game, and that's what counts. Not gonna lie, this is probably not only the most fun that I've had doing a challenge run, but probably also the most fun I've had playing Pokemon in general, especially during that final battle. I was so hyped. There are almost definitely things I could have done better though, to make things a little easier, like planning battles more ahead of time or hunting for the perfect IV and natured Pokemon, but I think that would have just made it less fun, honestly. I plan on eventually running the rest of the Pokemon games, so if you enjoyed this, why not give it a like and subscribe as well to see those other runs when I get around to them. Until next time, I've been Katie Cat, and thank you for watching. Okay, so if you understand this image, then you can guess what my Ponyta's nickname was gonna be.